Three, two, one, action.
What up, guys? Welcome back to Off the Record, where we talk about whatever we want. And today's segment is Ask an Expert, and we have Kevin, a real estate agent here. And one question I wanted to ask you is, when people buy a house, they always say like, oh, it's an escrow, an escrow, an escrow. But I don't really know what escrow really means. Like, what are all the steps that happen in an escrow, and how come it takes like, I don't know, a month?
Very good question. So in California, we use escrow. Depending on what state you live in, it could be something else.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, some use attorneys who just literally do the same thing as what escrow does, but we in California have escrows, right?
So what the hell is an escrow?
Yeah, why is it a crow?
Yeah.
That I don't know. But basically what happens is, the typical process is you go out there, you look at properties, you like a property, you submit an offer, and it gets accepted, right? So from there, a buyer and a seller has specific things that they have to do, right? One of the first things that you would have to do is, once we get an acceptance, there's a thing we call the initial deposit. It basically secures you with the property, right? So at least you have some money in the game, right? As opposed to, hey, like in 5 days later, you're like, peace, I don't like this property, I'm out, right? The seller can't hold you to the property.
So that money in the game, if that guy changes their mind, you get to keep it?
Potentially, right?
See.
Depending on how the contract is formulated and the process that comes through. But first thing after acceptance is we bring in the deposit. It secures the buyer to the property. That money goes to escrow, right? So the agents don't handle that money. The seller doesn't get that money yet. It just goes into a neutral third party between the buyer and the seller. That money gets held in the escrow account, and then the buyer typically will have things that they have to do, right? Because right now they only see the property. It looks good, feels good, they want to move there, but is it a good property, right?
Like, it could have termites?
Could have termites.
So you do all the checkups during the escrow time?
That is correct. So in the offer that you write, typically you're going to have a specific amount of time to do these specific actions. So the biggest ones are going to be inspections. And the inspections could be just what we call general home inspection, termite inspection. You can check the sewer line depending on the age of the home. You can have an electrician, or if you're planning to remodel, right, you might want to bring a contractor out. How much is this going to cost me? Is it going to be out of my budget, within my budget? So there's all of these things that we have to do within a specific amount of time, right? Now, if you go through that process and you find out, okay, this is just too much work for me, or there's too many things wrong with the property, then of course you can cancel, and that deposit that you put in, you can get that back as a buyer.
Is that typically like the biggest thing that happens, is something severely is wrong with the property?
Yeah, or you can find out somebody died in the property and you're like, well, I'm not doing this. Right.
Is that why sometimes you can change the price after you find out stuff and you're just like,
yeah,
hey man, you didn't tell me about the broken pipes, it's gonna cost me like 50 grand.
Correct.
And they'll be like, okay, I'll give you a discount.
Yeah. And there could be things in like the disclosures that a seller fills out that a buyer has to review. So there's gonna be a stack of reports and disclosures that a seller, fills out about the property and gives to the new buyer to review. So if they've had tons of plumbing issues, that could cause, like, let's say, a red flag for the buyer as they're reading this, or as their agent reads it with their client. So then they could be like, hey, this is something that you might have to deal with, because if it's happening with them, most likely it's going to happen with you unless they've corrected it, right? Or if they did correct it, did they have a professional licensed plumber come do it? Where's the invoice? I want to make sure that it was done right. So you have that. Plus, then on top of that, most people are going to get a loan, right? So if you're getting a loan, you want to make sure, even though you've been pre-approved first, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a loan to purchase the property.
Because you could have fucked up your credit or something.
You could have, or you could have gone and bought a car, right, in the meantime, and then now you just owe too much and you're going to get less of a loan. Right?
Dude, I love going for it like that. I'm in escrow now. I'm gonna buy a car now.
Like in a week in escrow.
Whoa.
Yeah, so
they look for that like debt to income
ratio, right? So they're always gonna look how much money you make, what's your expenses.
Wow.
Right?
Balls on some people.
So you have that.
You see that nice car though, dude. Gotta get it.
True. And then the other thing is, because most people are getting loans, there's gonna be a thing called an appraisal, right? So the appraisal is basically the bank stating, okay, if you buy a house for $1 million, right, the bank wants to know, because they're giving you money, is a house even worth $1 million, right? Just because you're willing to pay $1 million doesn't mean it's worth it.
I see.
So let's say it's worth under $1 million, then what
Yeah.
happens?
So
Or it gets appraised for under $1 million.
yeah, so in the contract, the way it's set up is if the property doesn't appraise for the purchase price that you're paying, then you as the buyer have the right to cancel and you can get that deposit back.
I see.
Right? But it really depends on how the offer is negotiated, because in this competitive marketplace that we're seeing right now, people are paying a lot higher than what
It's worth.
appraisal. Yeah, because people are just trying to grab anything and everything that they can, right? Because we have no inventory. So some people are waiving the appraisal contingencies. So if you do that, you know, if the appraisal comes in low, you still have to purchase the property, right? But it's very case by case.
What if it's appraised for more than what you're paying for? Is that just called like a bargain? Like
That, yeah, then you have instant equity right when you move
Oh, that's
into the
tight.
property.
Does that ever happen?
It does. Not as much lately, just because it's been so crazy with people just overbidding on properties.
Is this a LA phenomenon, or do you think this is happening all over America?
LA for sure, California for sure as well too, just because we're not building at a rate. Even as crazy as many people going out of the state, we're still not building as quick enough for the population.
So when you say inventory, that means like there's not enough housing for people that are here in California?
Correct, because our population is so, well, I think there's a couple of different facets to this. One is there's a lot of red tape with government agencies, making it much more difficult to try to build, and that has just increased the cost for developers, right? So because of that, what's going to happen is you're just going to add more costs onto the end product. So if you do that, guess what? Prices are going to go even higher, and the margins get smaller as well too, because if you don't have a market for it, it's not going to work.
So the developer are the people that want to create homes and stuff?
Correct.
And then so because it's so difficult for them to build new homes in California, for them to be able to do it, it's these big guys that can actually afford it.
Correct. I mean, it's just going to increase the cost of actually developing the product. So if you're going to increase the cost, what's going to happen? The price
goes up.
But at least the politicians in California already have their houses, though.
Nice ones.
Yeah, there you go.
They don't have to worry about the rest of it.
I don't mind if no one else has a house.
If you build more, their value could go down for their houses. So I understand why they don't want to do that.
Why would they want to drop their own prices?
The other thing that we saw pretty heavily, or I saw pretty heavily whenever I would talk, so you have a lot of these baby boomers who have these huge houses, right? Kids are gone.
Like all the people in Pasadena, right?
Exactly.
Where it's like, I'm like, why is this house worth $2 million, but it looks like a 100 or 200 grand house out of state?
Correct. So what we see a lot with the baby boomers, the ones that have these huge houses, you know, there's a thing called Prop 13, which basically keeps their property tax rate. So if they bought this house like in 1970 for like a couple $100,000, their property tax is really low, right? So there is a Prop 60 and Prop 90, which allows a person 55 years or older to sell their property, and then they can buy something of equal or lesser value, and they can actually keep the same property tax that they were paying.
Oh, wow.
The house.
So they could buy another, like, $1 million or $2 million house, but pay the property tax of their old house, like that?
If whatever they sell their property for, right? So let's say they bought their house in 1970 for $200,000, they're paying like a couple thousand in property tax. If they sell their house today, right? Let's say it's $1 million, and they buy something $1 million or less, they can keep the same property tax.
Oh, cool.
If they're within the same county, so LA to LA county.
That sounds kind of fair.
There's a couple where they'll allow you to do reciprocals, different counties, but the realtor associations actually put a new bill out there. So the big problem was a lot of people were willing to sell their house, but the problem was they couldn't find something with equal or lesser value.
Oh,
Right,
unless
and-
they move like super far away or something.
Correct, but if they move out of state, then it doesn't work, right? If you move out of the county, it may not be 100%. So a lot of those people that I talked to was like, I'm not going to sell my house because I'm at fixed income at that point, right? So they just end up like, I'll just hold on to the property. Plus, the other thing is some of them have made so much money on their homes, they don't want to sell it and pay taxes.
I see.
Right. So I think those are a couple of the big dilemmas of why we don't see. One is, of course, just the developers, the cost being too expensive, and then two is just these baby boomers. They're not
moving.
They're not moving, right? So then what happens is we just gotta wait till they die, and then maybe get it at a discount.
We still got 20 years until they all start.
People are living longer. That's like the big dilemma.
If I have $1 million house in Pasadena, like you said,
Yeah.
I put that thing on fucking rollers. I take it out of state and I sell it. Do I have to pay California tax?
Hey, you put on a bunch of logs.
I think
and
so.
you're gonna keep
I think
pushing
so.
it.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Sucks, dude.
Yeah, but California did pass a legislation over the last ballot. So now the new law could be it's a statewide thing, so it's not a county thing.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is you could actually, so there's like a hybrid model, and they formulated after, I believe it was like Florida, where you can do it. Before it was like a one-time thing. Now I think you can do it up to like 3 times. And then the other thing is if you buy something for more, you can actually, there's like a hybrid model. So you can keep your original for, let's say you sold it for $1 million, you can keep that original 2,000, let's just say in the previous example. And if you bought a house for like 1.3, then there'll be like that new rate, right? So then it's like a little hybrid model. So then it still allows people to do it, and they're still able to capitalize on some savings. Yeah.
Today's video is brought to you by Care of. Care of is a wellness brand that makes it easy to maintain your health goals with a customized vitamin plan that helps you feel your best today and supports you long term.
What's really cool is that Care of is super transparent about their research and sourcing behind each one of their products. And your recommendations come in daily, individually wrapped packets that are perfect for getting back into the routine. Because I know, building a habit, it's hard when the actual doing of it is difficult. So when it's daily packets and make it convenient, it's that much easier to stick to your routine.
Yeah, and what I like about this is they have this easy 5-minute quiz that I personally took, and it's like a tailored approach to your unique health needs. And for me, my goal this year is to be able to sleep more. And what's cool is like they'll ask you in different things like lifestyle, diet, health concerns, and like if you're vegan, they'll make sure that they can have the right things for your lifestyle or whatever, right? And for me, I was like, I want to focus on sleep and making sure that I take the right supplements for that. So that I thought was pretty amazing how a lot of people, based on what their goals are, they can provide that for you.
So that's super awesome, and you can make taking better care of your health a New Year's resolution this year with this super awesome code to get 50% off. So to get 50% off your first Care of order, just go to takecareof.com and enter the code OffTheRecord50. That's 50% off your first Care of order. Go to takecareof.com and enter the code OffTheRecord50.
Damn, that sounds pretty crazy. There's so many, like, the more you get into it, there's like all this little detail stuff that you got to know.
If you were governor of California, what's the first thing you would do to help bring down home prices?
Home prices, probably let the developers actually develop, right? Because
But if you bring it down, then would people go into outrage like, what the fuck, I bought mine for
I think you
$500?
probably do it at a specific pace where
Yeah.
it's not going to be like detrimental. Like in 2005 or 2007 when we had that big crash, right? It was just because it was just oversupplied. People were just building like crazy, and then it
I
just
remember
impacted,
those.
right? Real estate, I always say basic 101 of real estate, supply and demand, right? You can cover supply and demand. You can pretty much dictate how the market moves, right?
And the average price for the nation is what, 300,000-ish?
Probably somewhere around
Right.
there, yeah.
So if you want to balance things out, then that's pretty outrageous because it's more than double what other people in the States have. But it makes sense because we have a concentration of a ton of people in LA County. It's like, what, almost 20 mil or something out, I don't know. It's over 10 mil though, right? So, but LA County is huge, but if you go to, let's say, Fresno or Central Valley or all these other places, California, there's a lot of other places that are just uninhabited.
But that's because people want to move here and become waiters and waitresses.
And become
And become active.
Oh, that too, yeah.
Some states have incentives, like come move here and we'll help you with your down payment, like pay
Yeah.
10 G's or something.
I mean, it's all lifestyle,
Yeah.
right? Like, what lifestyle do you want? What convenience do you want? And is it worth it, right? I mean, they always say we pay that weather tax. That's why we have.
That's true.
But is the weather tax worth it?
Fuck no. I'm out of here, bro. I'm out of here.
A lot of people are out of here.
Yeah. So yeah, are you seeing that? And where are they going typically?
So the biggest is I see a lot of the retired people. They like to move for whatever reason to Arizona right now.
Do they have zero state income tax too or no?
I believe so. There's zero. But I mean, over there, I think they can just get a lot more than compared to if you go to Nevada, like Vegas or even Texas.
So it's cheaper than Nevada in Arizona.
Yeah, depending on what parts you want to go to.
I like Tucson.
My financial advisor was saying a lot of people, like a lot of the retirement, do like to go to places with zero state income tax because the minute you crack your retirement open, the state could just come in and take their 10 or 11 or 13%.
Oh wow.
So that's why like people like going to Florida or Nevada or
Yeah.
Arizona.
Yeah, yeah. Those are the biggest ones that I see though. Nevada for sure. Texas, and then Arizona. I haven't seen many take like the trip all the way over to
Florida.
Florida.
I think people want to go where it's familiar.
Yeah.
Because I do see a lot of people from New York moving to Florida.
Yeah. Well, I see a lot of people actually from New York moving here to California too.
Oh wow.
No shit.
Yeah, because real estate prices are a lot cheaper. You get more for what you get. Just like how a lot of people here are moving out because they can get more.
So they see us as the cheap state.
Yeah, because they're so on
Crazy.
top of each other. And then a lot of the jobs are on coast to coast too, right? So I'll see a lot of people moving from East Coast over to West Coast.
Like if they worked at, I don't know, like Goldman Sachs or one of the major banks or something.
Yeah.
Like oh, okay.
I've seen even like Netflix people coming over, right? A lot of writers are moving over as well too. Yeah.
So what's the next step in escrow after you get it appraised and inspected?
So appraised, inspected. So talking about like bringing the price back down. So once you do your inspections, you know now the full picture of the house, right? Is it good? Is it bad? Are there things wrong with it? At that point, then you can renegotiate on price if there are things that are wrong. But there's two ways you can do it. You can either have the seller fix it, right, before you move in, or you can say, okay, I want X amount off and I'll take care of it on my own. Once in that is pretty much all tidied and buttoned up, then the next process is you get down to the closing part, which is the lender approves you for the loan. You're good to go. They'll send out the stack of papers that you got to sign your life away.
Sucks. That part's
For
so
30
boring.
years?
That part's so fucking boring.
It literally took me, I think, like 30 minutes to sign all the papers.
I did it for an hour and 20, I think, because it was me and Nikki both going back and forth.
Were you
Yeah.
reading every page?
No, like, it was just taking forever. I don't know why.
I just look at the person. Well, it's not even the person. It's like the notary, right?
Correct.
And you're just like, I think I trust everything that's happening.
Yeah.
Why don't they get on DocuSign or something?
So they're trying to do that. They're trying to actually do that. There are some states that actually allow for electronic notary.
Yeah.
California, I guess we're just a little bit slow. We like to be difficult.
Yeah.
But they are trying to work on that so then you can do it, especially with COVID, so you can do it electronically.
I feel like our government's like 40 years behind all the time. Like they just got a website running or some shit.
What's the most like escrow is usually 3 weeks or?
Anywhere between, if you're financing, like 30 to 45 days is the typical time frame. If you're paying cash, I mean, I've done it as quickly as like you can do it 7-10 days, right?
So let's say you have a buyer and a seller that's both a pain in the ass and they have so many things they want to like negotiate on.
Yeah.
Can it go past the 45 days or no? Or everything has to get taken care of within this?
That's what the contract will stipulate, are those time frames. Does that always happen in real world? There's always like, here's what the book says and this is what real life is, right? So it doesn't necessarily always happen that way, but of course you always want to be cautious because if you don't perform on a specific things, there's always a cause and a reaction to it, right? So if the other side wants to play really hardball, if you're not performing on, let's say, your due diligence time for inspections, they can send what we call notice to perform. They send a notice to perform and you guys aren't, abiding by the timeline, then the seller can cancel you. Same thing with closing as well too. If you don't close on time, whether it's the buyer or the seller, either party can send one of those notices to performs, or when we get down to closing, it's actually a demand to close escrow. And if you can't do it within 3 days, then whoever initiated that action could actually cancel you out, right? But of course, usually when we get down to that
You only
point,
have 3 days to perform or fix or.
correct.
Wow.
But usually when we get down to that point, everybody's trying to hold the transaction together, right?
see.
Because nobody wants to start over.
Everyone's
whether you're a
interested.
buyer or whether you're a seller, right?
Yeah.
So that's when it's really important where the agents come together, work out the differences, because seller might have one opinion, buyer might have one opinion. You want to kind of formulate and be like, okay, what's going to make everybody happy, right? Because you fall out, then you got to go through this whole process all over with another person, right? And you just have no idea what's going to happen at that point.
So that's why it's helpful to have the agents because they kind of
Correct.
like mediate and
Correct.
smooth things out.
So earlier you mentioned like a no contingency deal, which I've been seeing a ton. Like when I was trying to get some investment Airbnb properties, people were coming in and they're like buying it cash, no contingency, and then they would get it like immediately.
Correct.
And I'm like, man, how do we beat these guys? Because I'm worried that we get a place that's overpriced, but also there might be termites, there might be whatever. So in that case, do we just wait, or like what would you do in that situation?
I'm a big believer if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. There's no point in trying to force something, right? Because there are some things that we try to do and we're just like ramming it in there and it just never works out. So I always say if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Yeah.
Plus, when you go out there and you make no contingent offers, I mean, it's a huge risk if you have no reports up front.
Yeah.
You don't have anything. I mean, in San Francisco, they got really crazy because of the whole tech boom up there, right? You have all those VCs just making killings on monies, and you see home appreciations just go crazy up there. They were doing a lot of non-contingent offers, but most of the agents set it up where here's a report up front, here are all the disclosures up front, so at least you know what you're getting into, as opposed to going in completely blind, right? So if you go in completely blind, I would always say it's not the right property, right? Unless you're willing to take that risk, and that risk could be huge, right? Because
Or if you're a contractor yourself, right? Like you can walk in and you are the inspection eyes.
exactly, but there's only so much you can still do with just visually seeing
Can't
it,
you
right?
just go like, like
Check the door.
In my mind is a lot of these homes were being bought with the same no contingency stuff,
Yeah.
right? And then they'll give you a like that escrow period or whatever, but they're like, whatever you find, that's on you.
Correct.
And then I was like, people were still buying them, dude. Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
It's inventory, right?
It's all, yeah, inventory. It's like
And we're not even talking about LA. We're talking about up there in the mountains.
yeah. I mean, we're seeing it in a lot of parts of the country just because of the no inventory. But I mean, is it worth it? Because let's say you got to redo the whole plumbing, or maybe the foundation is off, and that's $20,000-$30,000. You already paid like a $30,000 premium, and now you got to dump another 20 into it. What for the normal person, if they're not an investor, they probably. I mean, remember we were talking about just like 3.5% down payment, or not even having 20% down. You have a big issue like this, how are you going to fix it? And if you don't fix it,
and you can't wrap that into the loan, so it's like 30 G's up front. that you
up front,
gotta
out of pocket, right? So if you don't have that and you have that issue, you don't fix it, guess what's going to happen? It's just going to get worse over time.
That's true.
Right? And we're talking about, what, $500,000, $800,000, $1 million property, right? So it's not something that is like really light right now.
So in your case, like, in a crazy time like this, unless you have like a deal that's you feel comfortable with, you just wait until things calm down and then you start purchasing, or like what would you do?
Well, I think with a lot of buyers right now, they know they can afford so much, right? So I think it's really coming down to being okay with what you can buy right now. So a lot of people do look at that. I'm going to be here for like 30 years. This is going to be my forever home, which is true to a certain extent, but most people on average probably change houses within every 7 years, right?
Really?
Yeah. I think the actual stat's always been roughly around 7 years.
They get tired.
Yeah, or there's changes in lives, right? I mean, look how much our lives have changed in a year, right? So there's that you have to kind of look at, right? Everybody always wants more, right? You're like, okay, I can afford $1 million, but the 1.2s look a lot better, right?
That's true. If you get a raise or something.
Yeah, so I think you always got to be within your means of whatever you're going to purchase. And especially as crazy as the market is going, like if you can only afford $1 million and you're looking at $1 million, guess what? Those are going to get pushed to like 1.1 or higher.
But speaking of that, right? So there's a lot of buzz about real estate being in a bubble right now.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
So compared to our last crash, so I was really young in the industry at that point.
That was
with
2008,
the last, 2008. I was like 3 years into the business, so I didn't really understand it. But looking back at it, I mean, it was like a triple whammy, I always call it, right? Because you had people that were purchasing, a lot of people back then, you can literally buy 100% financing. As long as you had a heart rate, you got a loan.
Wow.
And you didn't have to put any money into it.
So people that couldn't afford
Freddie Mac, Fannie
homes
Mae.
were buying homes.
Yeah, because they had special, we call it 80-20 back then, right? 80-20 loan. So you had one lender give you 80%, and you had another lender give you 20%.
Wow.
Right, so you literally came $0 to the table. There are even lenders, there's closing costs whenever you buy a house.
Yeah.
So there's those escrow fees, those lender fees, and so forth. They even had lenders that would be even willing to pay for your closing costs back then.
Wow.
So literally $0 out of your pocket and you can go buy a house.
I missed that bubble.
A lot of people also got loans, what we call interest only, right? Which isn't necessarily a bad loan. You just have to strategically know how it works.
How to utilize it.
Utilize it correctly, right? So they were paying just the minimal. They were just paying the interest on the property. So when those loans readjusted and it was principal plus interest, right? They were like, whoa, our payment now is like 3 times what we were paying before. So those people definitely couldn't afford the house at that point. So they lost it to that. Plus we also overbuilt at that time, right? And then on top of that, then we had the whole economy crash. So that's why I say it was a triple whammy. So is that going to happen in this market? I know for sure the qualifications is like 10 times stricter than what it was before. Like they go through everything and anything in your credit scores and like history and all that to make sure that you're qualified, right?
Right now on, because I'm going through the process with the Nevada house.
Yeah.
And the loan officer over there like would even ask me like, what's this $17 payment in your credit card?
Correct.
Like I see, yeah, you don't ever use this credit card.
Correct.
And all of a sudden you have a 7. I'm like, oh, I just.
That's my OnlyFans.
OnlyFans, you know, like,
OnlyFans subscription.
they're really like trying to see and
Correct.
really study your pattern before they
Correct.
allow you a loan.
Yeah, because back then there's these things we call stated programs. We still have stated programs today, but like they were just so loose. Stated is basically I make this, and they're like okay, right?
Oh shit.
They kind of have that now. But it's a lot more stringent than what it was before. So I don't see that happening because that triggered a lot of the properties coming out onto the marketplace where people couldn't afford, right? And that created this excess supply that we had. Right now is just literally we haven't been developing at the pace of our population in California, at least. People are getting well qualified, so I mean nothing lasts forever, right? So I think it really is going to hinder upon what happens with our economy, right, moving forward. I mean, they're pumping a lot of money into our economy. We might get, a third stimulus plan coming out. I think inflation is going to happen. So if you look at historical cycles, if inflation happens, real estate prices skyrocket. Right, so
Even more than now.
yeah. So will that happen? I mean, we're in such a weird time because
Should I hold on to my house and sell it?
Yeah, dude, come on, what are we doing? I'm about to move.
yeah. I mean, we're in. I mean, because look at the stock market, right? Does any of that really have solid fundamentals to it?
No, it's just money being pumped.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's where I think the divide is getting much bigger. So will we have that crash? There's got to be a correction at some point because
Hopefully
affordability.
after I sell.
I hope so too. Affordability is just going to get to a point where it's just nobody can afford it, right? Because it's getting to that level, you know.